The topic of this evening's talk is, actually you can put it both way round. He who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma. If you see one thing, you must see the other as well. So it goes both ways. And the reason I chose this topic this evening is because just how wonderful it is that when we see the Buddha in life, how we can see the Dhamma and how it can solve many of the problems which we experience in life. Because Buddhism is growing very, very fast in Western countries. And one of the reasons it's growing so fast is because it's being used to solve all types of problems in the world. I was just talking this morning and somebody found out something which I heard last October. Do you know now in Oxford you can get a degree, a PhD in meditation studies? You can. Because the British government is realizing that these teachings, which are 2,500 years old, they work so well, especially mindfulness. There's so many people stressed out, in the world, especially in Western governments, in the organizations and corporations, and just in homes. And that's costing people huge amounts of money with sicknesses and swamping their health system and low productivity. When you realize just how meditation and this Buddhist teachings are so effective, this talk should be subsidized by the government. We're saving the health department of Malaysia millions of ringgit by coming here this evening. And it's true. Which is why the British government are starting to introduce this as courses where they want more people to understand what's going on, to make it even more clear that it works, and to solve the problems of human life. But it's not just solving the problems of human life, it's also giving a deeper meaning to why these things are happening and what's going on. And so this evening's talk, I'm going to start off just in ordinary things of life, and maybe, hopefully, we'll go into the deeper aspects of Buddhism and the Dharma and the truth and everything else. So this evening, the meaning of life will be revealed to you. Maybe. So he who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma. I know that I've seen on some of these car stickers over in Australia, they say that Jesus lives, Buddha's dead. I think that's not right, because the Buddha's still alive. Of course he's alive. If you see the Dhamma, you see the Buddha, and you can see the Dhamma, can't you? So you must be able to see the Buddha. And this is a wonderful little saying, because it shows you that what Buddhism really is, what a Buddha truly is something much more than the person or the statue. If you really understand what this Buddha truly is, it's a beautiful symbol, an inspiration, a path to seeing deeper into the meaning of life. And if it really is worthwhile, truthful, or anything else which is worthwhile and valuable, it should have wonderful effects in your life. And that's why when people come and ask me, how do you know that your meditation or your understanding of Buddhism is going well? Do you have to do an examination to find out if you really understand the Dhamma? So yes, you have to do an examination. And the examination is getting a monk like me to look at your mouth, to see whether the corners are turned up or turned down. The more the corners are turned up, the more you understand what the Buddhism is all about. What are the Four Noble Truths? What's the first Noble Truth? No, come on. Many of you know me long enough now. If I ask a question, it's always a trick question, never answer. That's what I read, and that's what it says in some of the books. First Noble Truth is suffering. But this is what I encountered when I first went to a place like Australia, and I had small groups of people, first of all. And they came in, and I said, First Noble Truth, suffering. Before I got to the second Noble Truth, they were out the door. They don't want to hear more about suffering. They have enough about that in their life. So I changed it around. I didn't alter Buddhism, I just swapped the order. So I call the first noble truth happiness. Second noble truth, the cause of happiness. Third noble truth, that sometimes we're unhappy. Fourth noble truth, why you are sometimes unhappy. And that is exactly the four noble truths as the Buddha taught it, but just swapped around. It's just altered for marketing purposes. Because you've got it, because when you say happiness, first of all, people are interested. And then when you say the cause of happiness, now they're really interested. That sometimes we're unhappy, yeah, that's true, but why we're unhappy? Now you can see the different effect that has on people. And that is actually basically what Buddhism is all about. And why it teaches people from the very basic level to have a happier life, less problems, which is why these universities in the West, they're giving it a different name. They're calling it mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. Mindfulness-based means meditation. Cognitive therapy means Dhamma. That's what it means. And so, these days, people are exploiting the resources of Buddhism, meditation and Dhamma to help people in this world, which is what they're supposed to be doing. And it's wonderful to see that and see this Dhamma just grow and grow and grow in the world. But we have to understand that, as many people tell me, for example, that because I was a theoretical physicist, I still keep in contact with the professors of physics over in Western Australia. Now, with both Professor David Blair, he was the Australian Scientist of the Year last year. He's a professor of physics at UWA, and Mario, the professor of physics at Curtin University. And I'm so well in with the physicists in Western Australia that when the big physicists came to Australia to visit, and that was Roger Penrose, he was a fellow who discovered black holes. You all know black holes. You've heard of them, may not know what they actually are. Sometimes people think that greedy people's mouths are like black holes, feeding your kids. Whatever. But now he came along then. I was the only religious person invited to speak to him because Buddhism and science, they fit together. So you might even say that he who sees the Dhamma sees theoretical physics. He who sees the Buddha sees the truth of things. And that's why I love my role now of actually trying to make these connections with all these different people. But I always remember that this Professor David Blair, when he was a student, he went to Thailand. He was interested in Buddhism. He was interested in meditation too. But when he went to the temples, he saw so many rituals and ceremonies, it turned him away. And for many years, he never followed his interest in meditation and Buddhism until monks like me came along. And I took what he said very seriously, that sometimes we have so many rituals in our Buddhism that we don't see the Buddha at all. We don't see the Dhamma at all. We just see the superficial rituals which many people play with. And sometimes some of those rituals are very dangerous. For example, I was a monk in Thailand for 9 years. People think that monks have got so much good karma that whenever we're in a bus, they always put me in the front seat. Because the idea is, there's no way they can have a head-on collision, because a monk in the front seat can protect everyone sitting behind. And I remember going from Chonburi to Bangkok once, and as soon as I got on the bus, the bus driver was smiling and smiling, put me in the front seat. And it's on the big highway, and going so fast and so much traffic. He put me in the front seat, and once I was there, he thought he was safe, so as he was driving, he was watching the TV on the movie. He was driving, watching the TV, it was terrifying. But of course, he was right. I had good karma, so he never crashed. We came close many times. You can see what a dangerous ritual that is. But I've tried to exploit that a few times. Once when I went on Thai Airways. I told them, look, sometimes planes crash. So why don't you put me in the front to protect you all? I only had an economy class ticket, but it was worth a try. They never put me up in first class. But some of those rituals, especially when people go and lighting joss sticks and bowing to the Buddha, they say, what are you doing that for? When you bow to a Buddha, do you know what you're doing it for? Or you're bowing to a monk? Why are you doing that? When I see the Buddha, I see the Dhamma. So when I see a Buddha statue and I bow to it, I don't bow to a lump of metal or a lump of wood. When I see a Buddha statue, the first bow, I bow to virtue. Because that's what the Buddha means to me. I see the Dhamma of keeping precepts, of being kind, forgiving, generous, good, harmless in life. And I bow to virtue. So every time I see a Buddha and I bow, I remember the value and importance of virtue. And every time I do the second bow, I remember this incredible beauty and power of peace. And when I do the third bow, sometimes I recall wisdom, other times compassion. I join those two together. So my 3 bows are to virtue, peace, and compassion. You know why I bow like that? Because I really value those things. I've experimented with them in my life, being a virtuous, good monk. They're really trying hard to keep my precepts as best I possibly can, and developing deep meditation to know what peace is. And just now in my middle years as a monk, just working hard out of compassion to help and serve others in whatever way I can. And I worship those things because they're such an important, valuable, they are the triple gem. They're jewels, they're priceless. Which is why that it's so easy for me to bow to those things. And I teach other people, when you see that Buddha, you're actually seeing those things. You're seeing virtue, peace and compassion. And when you bow, you're worshipping what's truly worth worshipping. You know, many other people see those things in the Buddha statue as well. I told the story this morning that I once went to give a talk many years ago at a very strict Anglican school. They wanted to have a talk about Buddhism. So I gave my talk about Buddhism, and afterwards I was invited to the principal's office, not to be punished, but to the principal to have a cup of tea and have a chat with him. And as soon as I went into this headmaster's office, I noticed he had a Buddha statue on his desk. And I asked him, "You're an Anglican, a Christian. What are you doing?" There was no symbols of Christianity in this office. I said, "What are you doing with a statue of the Buddha in your on your desk?" He told me, being the headmaster of a big school is a lot of stress. And that statue of the Buddha brings me peace. When I look at that statue, I feel the calmness just from that statue go into my heart. I thought, wow, there is a Christian who, when they see the Buddha, sees the Dhamma. And I thought, that is what we mean by these statues. We have them because of the symbols and the meaning and the inspiration which they can give us. Which is the other reason that if somebody goes along and destroys a Buddha, they can't destroy a Buddha. They can blow up the statue, but they can't destroy the Buddha. Because for me, the Buddha means peace, or virtue, peace and compassion. And I don't allow anyone to destroy that. That old story I tell that many years ago, when throughout the whole world, the front page news in the newspapers were about the soldiers, the US Marines in Guantanamo Bay, who had taken a copy, allegedly, of the Islamic holy book, the Quran, and flushed it down the toilet. And because that was big news, and because I was well known in Australia, the media rang me up. the newspapers said, what do you think about that? What would you do, Ajahn Brahm, as a leading Buddhist, if somebody flushed a Buddhist holy book down the toilet? If they took, say, a copy of the Dhamma and put it in the toilet bowl and pulled a chain, what would you do? And I told him straight away, sir, if somebody flushed a Buddhist holy book down the toilet, I would call a plumber. Common sense, isn't it? I don't know why other people didn't think of that. But I said I will not allow anyone to flush peace, virtue and compassion down the toilet. You can flush the book down the toilet, you can destroy the Buddha statues, you can blow up the temples, you can even kill the monks and the nuns. But I'll never allow you to kill and destroy virtue, peace and compassion. Because that's what the Buddha represents. When you see the Buddha, that's what you should be seeing. That's the Dhamma. Which is why I call the Buddha statues, the books, the monks, the temples, I call them the containers. And it's the contents which are most important. You can always get a new container, but the contents, that is what is valuable. And the contents of the Buddha statues, what it represents to you, the peace, the virtue, compassion, that's what's contained in it. That's what's contained in the books. That's what's contained in the speech. Hopefully that's what's contained in my life as a teaching monk. It's not Ajahn Brahm, it's the peace, the virtue and compassion, the symbol of what I'm trying to convey. That's what's really important. So you can kill me, but not today, thank you. I've got a very busy schedule tomorrow. And don't let anyone sort of destroy virtue, peace and compassion. And that way that we protect what these symbols are really supposed to represent. And when we know that, we know why we bow, we know why we offer candles and incense, we know why we go to temples and build good, nice temples. I know why I'm building a retreat center. It's not as some symbol, and look, my retreat center is bigger than your retreat center, because there's a lot of competition in the market for retreats these days. I heard other people are building retreat centers, and I'm thinking, wow, should I try and make mine better to keep the market share? Maybe in my retreat center, maybe we could have a menu on retreats. Maybe everyone could have their own servant or maid. No, we're not into competition. What we're into is actually presenting opportunities for people to develop in virtue, peace, compassion and wisdom, to pass on the Dhamma. That's what Buddhism is all about. And so the books, I know that sometimes people say you should never read a Dhamma book on the toilet. Why not? If you're going to spend a long time on there, you might as well do something useful. As far as I'm concerned, if it makes you more peaceful, virtuous and compassionate. Anyway, look at the symbol of the toilet. It's a place where you learn how to let go. There's a lot of Dhamma when you go to the toilet. And it's true, if you tense up and you sort of don't do it properly, you get into big trouble. So you've got to relax. And this is all actually how you can see the Buddha in all these different parts of life, when you know the Buddha is a symbol for things like virtue, peace and compassion. And so what we do, I like to, because I just go around with all sorts of different monks and nuns and people these days, and also not just Buddhists, over in Australia have a wonderful time being able to meet all these leaders of other religions. Was it last October we had the Archbishop of York visiting Perth, and I had morning tea with him. He's the number 2 in the Anglican Church worldwide. Now the next in line to the Archbishop of Canterbury. And it's wonderful having access to these people. So over morning tea, I said, oh, just by the way, Buddhists don't believe in God. And that was a wonderful conversation starter. And I did this on purpose, not to offend him, just to get his mind open, get him to listen. But I say, what is God anyway in your religion? And I mentioned something which a Catholic the abbot of a local Benedictine monastery. He's a really good friend of mine. I mean that. We really get on so well together. We have wonderful discussions about their religion and Buddhist religion. And I remember at a talk we gave together over in a university in Western Australia, that we fronted up together, we're giving a talk, and one of the questions which was asked for me was, this was from a well-known broadcaster. He was also a Catholic, on radio in Australia, on the ABC, and he has got a weekly program. He asked me, as a Buddhist, what is your idea of God? How can you grasp that idea? And I used this following simile. I said, the man sitting next to me, the abbot, a Catholic abbot of a Benedictine monastery, he once told me this. He said that he had a fundamental belief from his experience of life, not from books, from experience, that every human being is searching for God. So that's what he told me. And I respect what people say. And so I turn that inside and say, well, if everyone is searching for God, what am I searching for as a Buddhist monk? And I say, what I search for is peace, virtue, compassion, truth. So if that's what I'm searching for, and you say everyone is searching for God, I added those two up and say, well, that's what you must mean by God. And so I told the Archbishop of York, now this second very important leader of the Anglican Church, with I don't think like 70 million people in the whole world following that religion. And I said, why don't we stop the word God and call it peace, truth, compassion? And then I'll be standing by your side, supporting you with my arm around you, because I too worship peace, compassion, virtue, love. So I told him, if we change the names of these things, then instead of seeing the Buddha or see the God, we see Dhamma instead. He who sees that type of God would see the Dhamma. So I've changed it around again. He who sees God sees Dhamma. But if you just see like the Buddha statue or your symbols, your containers, what you believe your teacher is, and you just stop at containers, you don't go to the contents, that's where we have all these arguments and wars and problems with the different religions of our world. But if we see deeper what it really means, what is that thing containing? The contents. That's actually where we can understand something really deep. When we do see the Buddha, we do see Dhamma. It doesn't matter where you come from in life. Once you see those beautiful things like virtue, peace, and compassion, it obviously is inspiring. It moves people, and people get uplifted, and they want to make more virtue, peace, and compassion in their world. And when that happens, we create a better world. We become better Buddhists, they become better Christians, better Muslims, better everything. Why not? So we have to see deeper than just the symbols. We have to make use of them and find out why they were there and where they came from in the beginning. Even like little symbols, like my robe. You can see the way that monks wear their robes, loose and flowing. When I gave a talk last Monday to a group of executives, it's called the World Presidents Organization. To join that, you have to be a CEO of your own company before you're 40. So these were some of the really whiz kids of the business world in Western Australia. And one of them, they're very perceptive, one of them looked at me and said, when I was young, said I went to a Catholic school taught by nuns, and all the nuns had these very tight uniforms on. And that was what they were like. They were just so tight and tense. He said, I see you monks, and you're just so loose and open. He said, there's a symbol there for these robes. Simple, loose, easy, comfortable, but very practical. Which is actually why we do these beautiful, non-tense, relaxing meditations and Dhamma. If whatever you hear here makes you more uptight, it's a waste of time. But if what you hear here makes you more relaxed, frees you from tension, frees you from problems, then it is Dhamma. So you can know what Buddhism is by its effect on a person's life. It makes them more peaceful, more harmonious, easier to get along with. Which is why I tell couples, if you're Buddhists and you're living together, husband and wife, if you start arguing, what type of Buddhist are you? This is one of my friends. He's still a very nice friend. He's a patron of our retreat centre. It's Dr. Jeff Gallup, who was the former Premier of Western Australia, the head politician in that country. And I met him many times, and he was so interested in the Dhamma that basically he became a Buddhist. Because I remember just the Minister for Planning in Western Australia, she told me at a meeting, she said, our Premier, her words were, he's ripe for plucking. For all intents, she was a Catholic, for all intents and purposes, he's a Buddhist. And she told me what happened many times. They were having an argument in the cabinet. And this is, a very powerful government with all the huge resources in Western Australia, huge mining, a great big budget. Whenever there was an argument, he'd bang the table and said, we should be more Buddhist about this. Stop arguing. So if you're a Buddhist, can't you have some virtue and peace and some compassion and kindness? So how do we do that? How do we see the Buddha in the relationship? How do we see the virtue, the peace and the compassion with your partner? Where does peace live? Where does virtue live? What is compassion? Very often I do Buddhist marriage blessings. I've done heaps of them. Just a few days ago, I was doing a Buddhist, this was actually over in Singapore, only 2 or 3 days ago. And I looked at this couple, they've just got married, and they came to be blessed. And I looked at him, and I said, from now on, being a married man, you should never think of yourself. And he smiled and nodded. And I looked at her, his pretty young wife, and said, from now on, you should never think of yourself either. And she smiled so sweetly. And I told her, you should never think of him either. And she got really confused. And I told him, you shouldn't think of her. Now, confusion is a wonderful way of teaching because it's opening up a door. You're not following what you already know. You're seeing something different, deeper into the truth of things. So from now on, you should never think of yourself, nor should you think of your partner. From now on, you should only think of us. Of us. Come on. You're not Gundu. I hope I pronounced that right. That's stupid, isn't it? From now on, remember you're a pair. And if you think of the other person, then there's one person who's missing in that relationship, which is you. If you're just thinking of yourself, there's no relationship at all. Where does that relationship live? Where does it grow? It's in the space between the two of you. It's what goes on between you, not in him, not in her, but in between you. So once you see that beautiful space in between, that's where the Buddha lives. Not in the image, not in you, in the space between, in how we relate to each other and how we relate to the things which happen in life. And I've sold many marriages that way because marriages, relationships, they break apart when it's his fault. It's her fault. That's both are wrong. Oh, it's my fault. That's wrong too. If there's a problem in marriage, whose fault is it? Our fault, yeah. And when it's our fault, then we work together to solve it. We don't say you fix yourself up or I fix myself up. We fix ourselves up. It's the same if you have the Buddhist Gem Fellowship. Any problems there, it's not his problem. It's not that we's problem, it's not the secretary's problem, it's our problem. We're in it together, including me too. So when we see that, we see this beautiful relationship of the Dharma. That's what virtue is. Virtue doesn't live in a human being. Virtue exists in how we relate to other people, in how we relate to the animals, how we relate to the environment, and how we relate to the difficulties and problems which come up in life. That is where the Dharma lives. It's called right view or right attitude. And so often it's not trying to change the world, because you just can't do that. But you can certainly change the way you look at the world. And that's where you see the Buddha, in the wonderful change of attitude which you have. Say you've got cancer. If you've got a cancer, whose problem is it? Our problem, not your problem. It may be in your body. But why don't we look at it in a different way? When you've got cancer, how much of you has got cancer? Maybe about 2% of your body. 98% of your body is free from cancer. So what do you mean you've got cancer? You've only got a bit of cancer, that's all. The rest of you is very wonderful. Now, the reason I say that is because when we just focus just on the faults, on what goes wrong, we get very negative, upset, afraid. And it's that stress which causes the problem to go worse. We've got wrong view. It's how we relate to that cancer. That's how we deal with this. Which is why in one of those Mahayana teachings they say everything has got Buddha nature. So I tell people these days, cancer has got Buddha nature. Respect it. To understand what I mean by that, you understand that when you make peace with things, understand, accept and learn from them rather than fighting them at all costs. When you learn how to relate to life in a Buddhist way, with virtue, peace and compassion, you can even say to your cancer, "Thank you for coming to visit me, cancer. The door of my body is open to you." Instead of trying to get rid of it. When you try and get rid of things like that, you get tense. Is that the Buddhist attitude to things? The Buddha would never get rid of people, would accept anybody in. That's sometimes that I sort of told some of my committee off last week because a woman came in. You know what they're like in Australia? She had less clothes on than she had on. More skin than dress. I said, "You can't come in here dressed like that in front of the monks." They're very protective of me, but don't worry, I'm pretty safe these days. And they wanted to get her out. And I told her, look, what did the Buddha do when Patachari came to visit? She was absolutely naked. Sometimes that happens. You know, one of our monks, many years ago, when he first went to Australia, he got invited to teach meditation at a festival. It was a hippie festival. They supplied him with a tent, and he sat there, you know, teaching meditation. But half the people came in without any clothes. Very interesting, teaching meditation to naked 22-year-old women. So these are some of the difficulties you face of being a monk in the West. But you just see the Buddha nature in these people. You don't see the flesh or anything else. You see their kindness and their goodness. When you actually can see that, you don't send people away. You say, "Come in." And what the Buddha did, he just asked the monk, "Can you sort of put your robe around her?" But always would allow people to come in. And we can allow the difficulties to come into our life. They are part of life. We see the Buddha in the difficulties which we face in life. It's like the Buddha's come to visit you with a problem, a difficulty. So we don't reject it. We accept it as a way that we can really practice more our virtue, our peace, and our compassion. It's easy to practice virtue, peace, and compassion with the people you like. It's easy to do virtue, peace, and compassion and just leave whenever you want. But imagine having to practice virtue, peace, and compassion with your husband, with your wife, where you're stuck with them for a long time. Now that is a really good practice, because it's hard sometimes not to get angry at people who irritate you. But I was always taught by my teacher, it doesn't matter what you have to face in life. Even the mosquitoes in Thailand in those days, they were vicious. There were so many of them, because we used to live in a forest in the northeast, and it was thick forest. And these mosquitoes, they would swarm around just the Western monks, never the Thai monks. And you know why they did that? Because that was the first time in their history that they had Western food. So they had some Western food. They told all their mates, come over here, a new Western restaurant has opened up in the northeast of Thailand. And they used to drive us crazy. Hundreds of them used to bite you. And the worst thing was that you were Buddhist. You couldn't squash them. Ah. I used to do my loving kindness meditation. May all beings be happy and well, but I just couldn't do that. I made exceptions. May all beings except those damn mosquitoes. May all creatures except mosquitoes be happy and well, but not mosquitoes. And when we complained to our teacher, he was saying, call those Ajahn mosquito. They are your teachers. That was the Buddha. Came to teach us know how to deal with petty irritations in life. It was only a small irritation. It didn't last that long. They didn't have malaria. It was just irritation, that's all. And when you learn how to make peace with irritation, it doesn't last that long. Anicca, it will pass. It was no problem anymore. I learned so much from those mosquitoes. If ever any mosquito would sit still long enough, I'll bow 3 times to it. Because you learn from these things. Now, if that's a mosquito, sometimes maybe your husband, your wife is even more irritating than that. You should bow to them. Thank you so much for teaching me patience. You, husband. Because it's how we relate to these things. That's actually where sort of we have growth. And that's where we see the Dhamma. That's where we can do something in life. And it's great when we see the Buddha in these negative situations. But not in just negative situations. We can see the Buddha, in our so-called enemies. I used to spend a lot of time in prison in my early years as a monk. Not because I did anything wrong. But I used to visit prisoners. And some of these prisoners were really bad people. They'd done multiple rapes. They'd beaten up people. They'd stolen. Because this was high security jails. But when I saw these big prisoners, I always looked for their kind heart, the Buddha inside of them. It's a wonderful teaching of how you can look at somebody who was violent, angry, who's done terrible things, and see something inside of them which is beautiful and pure and kind and soft and generous. I could always find something in everybody which fit that description. So much so that it was an amazing experience over the many years I taught meditation and Buddhism in jails, that many of those prisoners, they started to see that same quality in themselves. They started to look at their softness, their kindness. I was watering a seed which had been long hidden deep within them. When I saw it, so did they. And they started to grow out of their anger, their aggression, and become human beings again, fit to serve in society. And I got one of the most wonderful compliments I've ever had since I became a monk, when I received a phone call from one of the prison officers. This prison officer called me and said, "When are you coming back to teach in jail?" And I said, "I'm so busy these days." going to Malaysia to teach at the BGM. I'm going to Singapore and running monasteries. They said, please, can you come back? I said, I'll send another monk. They said, no, we want you. I said, why me? And he said he'd been in the prison service for most of his life. He noticed one thing. The prisoners who came to my class, when they were released, never came back to jail again. What I had done, somehow I'd pressed buttons which no one else was pressing to get these harmed, injured people back into the real world again and a life with meaning and kindness. It's not me, it's just the Dhamma did this. When you see the Buddha in your enemy and you focus on that, how can they be your enemy anymore? When you see the Buddha in the people you're sitting next to, there you see the Dhamma. I don't know how many people here in Malaysia, how many Chinese people are scared of things like ghosts. I was telling Datuk Victor Wee that you see all these chairs reserved in the front, they're all for the ghosts. If you're sitting next to an extra empty seat, maybe it's not empty after all. But why are people afraid of ghosts? If ever you meet a ghost, see if you can see the Buddha in that ghost. See their kindness, their softness, their beauty. I used to do that when we used to go into these haunted monasteries in northeast Thailand, places which were full of ghosts. When you're kind to the ghosts are always kind to you back. You don't need to be afraid. You don't need to be worried at all. When you use the Dhamma, you see the Buddha in every experience, then these people become your friends, caring for you, protecting you. I'm going to be giving a talk, I think it's on Friday week, about Buddhist tales of the supernatural. And I'll mention more about ghosts and heavenly beings and how they protect people and how wonderful they are. But in life, when we start to see the Buddha in all aspects of our life, we start to see virtue, peace, compassion. It's amazing. There's nothing we can't learn from, nothing we can't grow from. Even the time when somebody dies, your loved one, someone you hold so dear. Can't we see the Buddha in the death? We see the beautiful Dhamma, that all things must pass away. We're only with each other for a while. When a person goes, we should let them go with our blessing. Allow them to go in peace, rather than holding on to them. Because that's a beautiful teaching for us. That's a Buddha talking. It's one of the great sermons when you see someone pass away. And I've seen many beautiful moments, so much so that I love being with people when they die. It's one of the most moving events ever. I know that many people say one of the most moving events is being there with the birth of a child. But I think it's more moving when you see someone die. When you can let them go. Look at it this way. How many people have seen the birth of a child? When the child comes out of the womb, it cries. When everyone else is smiling. You've got it the wrong way round. But have you gone to a funeral and seen the person in the coffin dead, smiling, when everyone else is crying? We get it the wrong way round again. But if you can see the beautiful Dhamma in death, you can see the wonderful opportunity there is to really express your metta, your loving kindness, in the most wonderful, beautiful way. Somebody asked me this afternoon or this morning, what's the difference between love and compassion? What we usually mean by the word love, now what most people mean, especially a couple of days ago, Valentine's Day. It's like the love a young man and a young woman have together. I call that paper fire. Because when you light a piece of paper with a match, it's a huge flame. And it looks really substantial, but it's pretty empty. And no, it doesn't last that long. But if you take the paper fire and you put some wood on it, some little twigs, and some bigger pieces of wood, and then big logs, then you have a real fire. What I mean there is doing things together as a couple after you have the paper fire. Especially the big logs represent the problems and difficulties you work through together. And if you work through them, then you have the big log fire. And that's a different level of love. But even bigger than that is the love which frees. If you've lived with your partner for so many years, or with your child, or with your parent, and it's about time for them to go, they're on their deathbed. Can't we say to them, I give you permission to die. Go with my blessing. Go in peace. The best and most wonderful type of love is the love which frees the person we love so much. I've seen that several times. I remember counseling one couple, a young man, very fit and healthy, who developed a cancer when he was only in his 30s, Steve. He was a Buddhist from the United States. His wife, Jenny, was a nurse from Australia. For many weeks I went to see them as he deteriorated, as he became bedridden. And a couple of days before his death, actually it was one day before his death, I went to visit them at their apartment. And there was Steve, just struggling to breathe, and his wife Jenny, just very upset. And I could see there was a tension between them. Being a monk, you can become very insightful. I knew what the problem was. I turned to his wife Jenny, looked at her, and said, have you given your husband permission to die yet? She never answered me, because she knew that I saw the problem. She jumped up on the bed, put her arms around her young husband, hugged him, and said, Steve, I give you permission to die. Go with my blessing. It's one of the most moving experiences I've seen on a deathbed. They hugged, they kissed, they cried. And the next day he went. He was hanging on for her because she hadn't freed him yet. One of the wonderful parts of love is the love which liberates. When you see that type of love, then you see the Dhamma and the Buddha. The great compassion of a Buddha which frees all other beings, which frees them from the difficulty and the pain, which frees them from the attachment, especially the anger and the guilt. That same sort of Dhamma looks upon yourself and all the things which you've done in your life and frees you from the guilt. Looks at the other people who have hurt you and harmed you and frees them as well. To give yourself permission to let go of the past with all its pain and hurt. If you can do that, there's something so inspiring, so beautiful. It must be the Buddha. Because where there's the Buddha, there is the Dhamma. And the sign of the Dhamma is this beautiful freeing of the heart, where the difficulties and the pain just vanish completely away. And in my life I've seen that so many times happen. When a person does express true compassion, what we call unconditional, the love which liberates other people and yourself, then you feel this beautiful peace in your heart. That's even the way that I practice my meditation. I liberate my mind, never controlling it. When you know what freedom is, what peace is,
what kindness is in your own heart, that's where you see the Buddha. You don't see the Buddha in the books. You don't see the Buddha in the temple. You see the Buddha in the center of that beautiful peace, compassion, stillness, which is right there in your heart right now. I often ask people when they're meditating, how would the Buddha meditate? Would he meditate like you do? Forcefully! I've got to get to enlightenment in this life. I've only got a few years left. No, the Buddha would never do things. Does you meditate with guilt? Oh, every time I meditate, I fall asleep. What would the Buddha say? He would say, never mind. If you meditate with that type of kindness, if you see the Buddha in your heart when you're meditating, you'll see the Dhamma there too. The Dhamma is peace, it's virtue, it is compassion. So that's why we see the Buddha within. The beautiful purity of virtue. Sometimes people say, is it hard as a monk to keep your precepts? It's so easy to keep precepts. These days, maybe I'm losing my memory. I only keep 2 precepts. That's all the precepts I keep. I never do anything which harms or hurts another being. And I never do anything which harms or hurts myself. Those are the 2 precepts. So those of you who can't count up to 5, always remember the 2 precepts, because that's the heart of it. Kindness, peace, virtue, compassion. So even when I meditate, I never do anything which harms and hurts my body or my mind. And that's why I have very wonderful peace. If you can do that, you know where you can find the Buddha. And the Buddha is alive. Not in a temple, that's just a container. The Buddha's alive in you. It was alive in the Archbishop of York. I don't know if he realized it or not. It's deep in the heart. Whenever you feel peace, whenever you have the inspiration of true compassion, forgiveness, peace, freedom, that's the Buddha. Not the image. The Buddha wasn't a man. Is freedom male? It wasn't a woman. Is compassion just limited to the female? The beautiful stuff of the Buddha was in his heart, deep in the peace where you go when you sit down and allow things to stop. This is where you find the Buddha, right inside your heart. And you know it's the Buddha. All of the compassion, the kindness, the power, the peace, the insight, everything tells you that this is a real thing. So these days, I know that in Australia and Malaysia, so many people go on pilgrimage. And where do you go on pilgrimage to? India. You don't need to go to India to go to the Buddhist holy sites. Because the Buddhist holy sites are not in Lumbini. They're not in Bodh Gaya. They're not in Sarnath. They're not in Kusinara. The real Buddhist holy sites are inside of you. And you know, it doesn't cost that much money. Nor do you have to go through immigration and customs. Nor do you have to have all these injections and worry about the food. This is Ajahn Brahm's pilgrimage to the holy sites inside. Not Ajahn Brahm's, it's the Buddha's. Now if you can go inside there, that's where you find where the Buddha lived. That's where you find the footsteps of the Buddha. That's where you see virtue, peace, and compassion. So if you go deep inside, that is where you see the Buddha. That is where you recognize the Dhamma. And you take what's inside and bring it outside. And there you see the Buddha everywhere in life. You see the Dhamma everywhere in life. And when you see that, there's nothing which you should reject and you can't work with. Everything is something which can be your teacher. Everything is something you can deal with. There's always something you can do. But instead of, as they say, complaining about darkness, real Buddhists light a candle. There's always something you can do, no matter what you experience. And that's the beauty of the Dhamma. Never negative, always positive. If you have an argument, there's always something you can learn from that. Grow from it. At least you have the wonderful opportunity to forgive. What a beautiful thing forgiveness is. It's say thank you for upsetting me, because now I have the opportunity to forgive you. Whatever it is, you can see Dhamma in so much of life. And if you see that, there's nothing which one can't use for growth, for more peace, for more freedom, for more harmony, for more love in this world. If you do truly see the Buddha, you see the Dhamma, and then you know peace. What more could you want? Thank you for listening. And thank you for staying. Now we come to one of the most wonderful parts of the show this evening. It's question time. Now, I don't know why this is, before I ask the questions, so many people come up afterwards to ask their question, but they don't dare ask the question in public. So please, ask it in public so you can share it with all other sentient beings. That's your gift, to give your question. Okay, come on.
Ajahn Brahm, why did Buddha?
Why did Buddha?
Why did the Buddha?
What, is that the question? Why did the Buddha? That's a very deep one.
I'm going to frame the question.
Oh, okay.
Why did the Buddha, in his infinite wisdom, expound the first noble truth as suffering, instead of putting it as happiness, as you had done it? Was it because he was not exposed to the concept of Dharma?
Okay, asking why did the Buddha teach the Four Noble Truths in the form of suffering first? And why do I use it the other way around? Was the Buddha not exposed to the law of marketing? No, the Buddha was a great marketer. That's why there's so much Buddhism around these days. That's why it lasted so long. But no, as well as actually teaching like this, I am a very good scholar of Buddhism. I know my Pali, I know my suttas, and the Buddha did not always teach from suffering. If you look at the second sutta in the first collection, Digha Nikaya, the Samanyapala Sutta, it's a wonderful teaching of the gradual training. And in the gradual training, it's gradual in what? Not in wisdom, in happiness. Starting to say that if a person actually meets the Dhamma, it gives them so much happiness. And then they try keeping precepts, and that makes them more happy. And then they start meditating, and that takes their happiness way up there. And they become enlightened, the paramang sukhang, the ultimate happiness. The Buddha taught that way too. So he mixed it around. Sometimes teaching one way, sometimes teaching the other way. But that teaching of the path of happiness, that is valid teachings of the Buddha as he taught it. But sometimes we just see part of those teachings, we focus on that, we miss the rest out. Remember, all of those teachings are not in the books. The books, as I've told you before, about that simile of the man in Australia who went to the expensive restaurant, is one of the really, really top restaurants in Perth. He had to dress well, went in, and the maitre d' gave him the menu in this beautiful thick paper embossed in gold. It was a very expensive restaurant. So he took the menu, ate it, paid, and left. And he left as hungry as when he went in. Now I think you know what that simile means. People go to these wonderful talks where they listen to the Dhamma and they just eat the menu. They learn Pali, they learn the suttas, but they don't really eat the food. They don't even try keeping the precepts or meditating or being compassionate. Remember, all of those teachings of the Buddha, they're the menu. When you put it into practice and you feel it happening, that's called the food. And if people mistake the menu for the food, they miss everything. Like even sometimes, say for some Christians, they look at the Bible and they beat people over the head with their Bible. That's a menu. And they're just, when you eat the menu and you don't bother to look at the food and eat that, no wonder that people get a bit crazy. But fortunately, that over in, say, Western countries, I know many Christians who've eaten the menu. And they're terrible to live with. But I know other ones who've looked at that menu and they haven't taken everything on offer. Do you ever go into a restaurant and eat everything which is on the menu? You get constipated and stomachache. They pick and choose what is useful for them. And that means they're very healthy. And I know many Christians who've done that. And these are ones who are wonderful people to live with. They eat the food, not the menu. Thank you. So tonight you also got good exercise as well. Very good.
This is for the public to hear. I've listened to a lot of your talks, mainly in the MP3. I put it in my car every morning and going to office and going back to work. One of the talk you mentioned that during the early days in Thailand, as a novice monk, it's a tradition that you will eat what the villagers give you, right? One of the stories you say that they give you weird food. One of them is frogs.
Yeah.
So just wondering, wouldn't eating meat means breaking the 5 precepts, one of the 5 precepts?
Okay, that's a very common question. Is eating meat breaking one of the 5 precepts? It is not, because the eating of meat, or the first precept is intentionally killing another living being. So because your intention is not to kill the being, you're eating the meat, it's not breaking the 5 precepts. That's very clear. But nevertheless, more than the 5 precepts is actually to try and have some compassion for other beings. And because of that, it's good as Buddhists if we can somehow or other limit our eating of meat and limit the destruction of other sentient beings. And it's not just with the food which we eat, it's all the other things which we do to try and have what we call a small ecological footprint, because we live at the expense of others. Even the space we take up for our houses and even our temples means that other animals don't have a habitat and they die. I know one of the biggest problems of our modern world is overpopulation. And at least as a monk, I'm doing my part to solve that problem. So we try and do the best we can. But you'll never be perfect. Even when you drive here, you'll notice that many living beings lie splattered on your windscreen. And even when you eat rice and vegetables and oats in your muesli, which I'll probably have tomorrow morning, if you can actually go and see in the paddy fields or in the wheat fields, when they are ploughed, when they are reaped, that so many animals lose their life when that happens. So everything you eat, even vegetables, even beans and muesli, is always at the expense of other beings. So what I learned was to try and limit the amount you use. So your destruction of other beings is minimal. And to understand, because your life is at the expense of others, to make sure you use your life well. Not just in heedless indulgence, but to learn, to practice the Dhamma, to learn more, to understand more. So your life on this human plane is really worthwhile. So when you die, everyone else who sacrificed for you, your parents, your teachers, your friends, it was a sacrifice well worth making. So it's not, I've extended that, not just from sort of eating meat, but to just the way that our life depends upon the sacrifices of others. Chinese New Year, you think of your parents and how much they sacrificed for you. And maybe their lives were cut short because of how hard they worked. Not thinking of themselves, but just thinking of their children's happiness and well-being. So please make your life worthwhile out of filial piety to those who've gone before, who live short lives, so we can live longer, happier lives. If you can be a vegetarian, wonderful. But don't look down upon others who aren't. Your compassion should go to all beings, including carnivores. So, next question. Yes, please, come up. And thanks for those tough questions, because they are difficult ones to understand, and sometimes you have to ask many times before the message gets in.
Sir, the question I thought is on faith healing. I know of someone close who has cancer in his neck. Western medicine, not much help. He's a Christian. He later went to Indonesia to seek help from a faith healer. He's a Muslim. The faith healer showed him the plain cloth and rubbed onto his neck. Later, in front of everybody, a lot of people witnessed, the cloth became red in color with blood and with a piece of tissue. So later, he came back and to the X-ray and the report from hospital. It seemed that the cancer tumor has become smaller, reduced. So what is our Buddhist view on faith healing? Is there any truth in it?
Okay, what's the Buddhist view on faith healing? Yeah, it's not just faith. Understand exactly what's going on when such healing happens. There's many, many factors occur. And sometimes the power of the mind is huge. I remember just as a scientist being always interested in these very weird and strange experiments. One experiment which I was fascinated by was when a person was put under hypnosis and the hypnotist got out a nail, just like a 3 or 4 inch nail on the end of a piece of wood, and told the man under hypnosis that that nail was red hot, had been heated up to a very high temperature, when it was just at room temperature. But the hypnotist touched this metal on this man's arm, and he screamed in pain because he believed it was hot. But the interesting thing was a burn mark and blister came actually up on his hand. He had willed that blister on his arm. There was a very clear case that because he thought it was hot, doesn't mean whether it was hot or not, because he had faith that it was a very hot piece of metal, he actually burned his arm. There was no physical cause at all for that. The power of the mind is immense, which is why the Buddha said that the mind is the forerunner of all things, which I say is that one's attitude towards things has a huge impact upon things like cancer. Just the power of belief is enormous. But it's not just the power of belief, it's actually the power of the mind to interfere in other ways as well. There's many cases I know of Buddhists who haven't actually gone to Indonesia, they've just stayed at home and got their local priest to do some chanting. And if they believe that that's going to work, it has enormous power. And I've seen that happen. I know that meditation has enormous power, that one of my friends who comes to the temple very often There's an Englishman called George. He was from the East End of London, and I am the only monk who can understand what he says. He's got such a thick accent, a big Cockney accent. And the reason that he comes to the monastery regularly is because he's maybe in his 70s now. He would smoke and smoke and smoke because that's what you did in that time and place. And he was a chain smoker, so he got lung cancer. And he told me it was so bad that when he went to his doctor, the oncologist had the x-ray they'd taken a few hours before and showed it to him. Both lungs were completely riddled with the cancer. And the specialist told him that the usual way of dealing with lung cancer is to cut out the part of the lungs which had the cancer, which had the tumours. But he said, we can't cut them out because we'd have to cut out all 100% of your lungs. It's everywhere. And the doctor said, what we can do is give you some radiation therapy and chemotherapy, but it'll only extend your life by 2 or 3 months at most. But we'll do that if you want. Go home and talk it over with your family, which he did. And what he decided, which is what most people would decide, why go through all of that quite difficult therapy just for an extra 2 or 3 months? He went back to the doctor 2 weeks later to say, just let nature take its course. I don't want the radiation therapy or the chemotherapy. But the specialist insisted on giving him another x-ray to see how the cancer had progressed. And so George went into the specialist's room, and the specialist was looking at the new photographs, the new x-ray, shaking his head. And poor old George got so scared, he thought, it's got worse, hasn't it? How many days have I got left? Tell me straight, doctor. And the doctor looked up at him and says, George, I'm shaking my head, not because it's got worse, because it's completely disappeared. What the heck have you been doing, George? In 2 weeks. And the photographs were there. In 2 weeks, cancer with both lungs, inoperable, no hope, had completely disappeared. And George said, I've been meditating. Carry on, George. That was an extreme case where 2 weeks of meditation, photographs before and afterwards, completely cured a cancer. It's not just faith, it's many other factors happen there which cure people. But I remember seeing a video of an evangelical Christian in the United States who used to be a faith healer. But he got so upset with the charlatanism, the fraud which went on in the United States with such faith healers. He said, well look, every doctor knows that maybe 10% of all ailments are psychosomatic. And he said, so psychosomatic means you believe you're sick, and so you make yourself sick just because of belief. So that's the stuff we can heal. They weren't sick to begin with. And many people are like that, sometimes not walking or whatever, coughing. So much of sickness and healing is mind-made. That's amazing what you can... Don't know how many business people are too busy to get sick. It's a common thing which is found in our modern world. If you've got so many things to do, you just cannot get sick. You can't afford to get sick. But then you go on holiday, and as soon as you have a couple of days off, you get sick. It's true. I mean, the sickness is just waiting for you. You schedule it in. The mind has enormous power. This is one of my stories that about the nature, not faith healing, it's another type of healing which is quite amusing. I wasn't always a monk, but I remember when I was, just after I finished university, I did 1 year as a teaching course up in the north of England in the town of Durham. And this one day, it's a very cold place, and one day I had a terrible cold. My eyes were streaming, my nose was streaming, I felt awful, and there's no way I was going to go to the lectures that day. I was laying in bed feeling like death. And there was no real
water coming, nose dripping, coughing, feeling terrible. I wasn't faking it. I wanted to go to studies, but I just couldn't do it. And there was a knock on the door of the house which I was sharing with some other students. Someone was making a delivery. It was my, what you used to call, hi-fi system. I'd send it up from London. It took a while to get there, and it was delivered. And I was so excited that I got some way to play my favorite music. I took it upstairs, unpacked it, set it up, and by the time I played my first record, which was Jimi Hendrix, I used to like Jimi Hendrix. I like much more peaceful music these days. Now, by the time I put my first record on, my first album, the cold had gone, and it went forever. It was amazing, just a little bit of happiness, taking my mind off the problem, had actually cured it. It was weird, it was strange. But it happens. Maybe Jimi Hendrix has got healing powers. It looks a bit weird. But that's actually, we do believe in the nature of the mind and the power of the mind and the ability for people to encourage that faith and that power and to give healing. It does happen. I've seen it many times. So yeah, we know it works. Yeah, question?
How was the world made at the first place?
How was the world made in the first place? Okay. I was a theoretical physicist, a scientist, so we actually know how the world came about. Came about very, very small, grew and grew and grew, just like how you came about. You were much smaller before, now you're growing bigger and bigger, just like our universe. And according to Buddhism, it's not the first time we've had a universe. Many, many universes, one after the other. And that's actually modern science says that. Carl Epstein, a professor at, I think, UCLA, he proposed a very wonderful theory, which is many people accept, of a sequence of universes. If it can happen once, why can't it happen twice, 3, 4, 5, many times? The idea of just one universe and not many doesn't make any sense. So we've had many, many series of universes, one after the other, for countless time. The most important part of your question is how we create the universe. Is actually each one of us create the universe. You're creating the world right now. Every time you're kind to your mummy, you're creating a lot of happiness in her. Every time that you are kind to others, you create a lot of happiness in the world. But every time you're mean and selfish, you create a lot of suffering. So when people ask me, who created the world? I say, you do. We create our world. And because we create it, we are responsible for it. And because we create it, there's nothing we can't do to turn this world into a beautiful place. The world is in your hands. Not in a God's hand, in your hands. To create your world the best way you possibly can. You know that happens because some people create a hell on this earth because of their stupidity and their anger or their grief or their guilt. While other people, because of wisdom, they can create a heaven. You are the creator. Even in Christianity, Psalm 42 says, be still and know that thou art God. Meditate, be still, go within. You find you are the creator. And that is basic Christianity, quoting the Bible. So it's great as a Buddhist, you can quote all sorts of things. And get away with it, yeah, thank you. So thank you for that question. That's where the world came from. It comes from you. So any next question? Yes, thank you.
Ajahn Brahm, someone once asked me, if Buddhism is all about compassion, why did the Buddha leave his young son and his wife?
Why did the Buddha leave his young son and a beautiful wife? Was that really compassionate? When the Buddha saw the big picture, when we see the little picture, for example, I often tell this as a story to people to tell them how to let go of the past. I don't know, so how to let go of the future, not worry so much. When I was a little boy, I had bad teeth. And I had to go to the dentist many times. And I hated going to the dentist. I didn't like going to the dentist. And I remember once I had a dentist appointment the following day. I tried to get out of it. I was only maybe 6 or 7 years of age. I told my mummy, "Mummy, don't send me to dentist tomorrow." She said, "You had to go." "Mummy, please don't." "You must go, son." "Mummy, you don't love me." "I do love you, you have to go." "Then why do you send me? I hate going to dentist." But the mum said, "You have to go." And that night I didn't sleep well because I was afraid and had nightmares of going to dentist. And in the morning I tried again. "Come on, Mummy, don't let me go." But she took me there herself. You know what happened when I got to the dentist? After all that worry and arguments and difficulty, I found my appointment was cancelled. All that worry for nothing because the future's uncertain. But my mother took me later on because she loved me. She was compassionate towards me. That's why she took me to the dentist. And so the Buddha's compassion, sure, it hurt his son and his wife, like going to the dentist, but he had something to take out, the cause of suffering. And he did that. So it was one of those stories like in the movies that had a happy ending. Rahula got enlightened. I think so did Yasodhara, his wife. And of course, so did the Buddha. So if you look at the big picture, yeah, there was some difficulties on the road, but everyone lived happily ever after. So sometimes you have to look at the big picture. You know, compassion has to be with wisdom. And the big picture was, if the Buddha had not left home, where would we be today? In the end, everybody won in the end. Just like I won, and so did my mother when she took me to the dentist. I hated it at the time, but it was good for me. So that's actually why the Buddha left home. He knew it was good for him, and his wife, and his son. He saw the big picture. That makes sense? Do you agree? Hope so, because that's all the answer you're getting. Okay, come on, let's another question. Yes, come up.
Yeah, Reverend. May I ask, just now you were mentioning about the mosquitoes. In Malaysia, we had this problem of dengue. So when we see mosquitoes, whether how to get rid of them. And
how to get rid of the dengue. We've already talked about that. Have some faith healing. If you get dengue, we'll give you some chanting to keep you.
And another problem is about the termites. If the house is infected by the termites, we will call the exterminators. So we're committing, killings.
Yeah. Yeah, no, if you possibly can. No, actually see if you can avoid the termites. Maybe give them some chanting. May all termites be happy and well next door, but not with my house. But people have actually done that with ants. I don't know if you try it yourself. They've actually seen the ants come into their house and they've given them heaps and heaps of metta. And the ants have turned around and gone somewhere else. Maybe try the power of your mind, but the best thing to do, the only reason why the termites come in there is because you're not really protecting your house. Now, I'm building this retreat center over in our monastery. No way we're going to spray anything, but you can actually use building materials to keep the insects out. We've got termi mesh. They just can't get through it. Or there's other ways of getting some stones, just the right size, not too big, not too small. You lay it down under your building and the termites just can't get through it. So there's all sorts of technology which is developed so you don't have to have those problems. A good example of this is in our monastery in Sussex, one of the first monasteries we built in the West. It was in farmland. It was a big house, a mansion, which was falling apart. So I think English Sangha Trust bought it, the monks renovated it, but there was a problem with rabbits. The rabbits were very clever. They'd live in the monastery, sanctuary, because the monks wouldn't harm them, and in the night time they'd go to the farms around and eat all the cabbages and the carrots, and the rabbits were having a wonderful time. They'd go out at night, steal all the farmers' food, and go back and stay in the monastery at night, during the daytime, where they were safe. And of course the local neighbours started to complain. We know where all these rabbits are going to. They're staying in your Buddhist monastery. It's all right for you, but this is our livelihood. Now, can you please poison those rabbits or shoot them? And these monks had a big problem there, because you have to look after your neighbours, but you also have to look after the rabbits as well. So what you do in such difficult situations, try and think outside the box. Think laterally, get another solution. So the solution was to have a rabbit fence, to keep the rabbits in. So they built this expensive fence around this property, so all the rabbits which were inside stayed inside and behaved themselves. And they couldn't go out. And so the local neighbours, the farmers, were very happy because their problem was solved. But they said that those rabbits, they'll keep on breeding and breeding and breeding and breeding. They'll overrun the place. And they never did, because the monks gave the rabbits 8 precepts. No, that's only joking. But the rabbits know how to look after themselves. They kept a stable population after a while. Nature is like that. It can stabilize itself. But that's how they never needed to kill the rabbits. So maybe if the termites are there, maybe you can just take out the wood which has been infected and replace it with, say, metal, or with wood which is termite resistant or something. There's always something you can do. It may cost a bit more money, but at least you're being kind to other beings. So that's what I would suggest. And if you do build houses, try and make the houses so that termites can't get in there from the first place. As far as dengue fever, how many mosquitoes carry dengue fever? And usually by the time they bite you anyway, it's already in there. So if you swat them, it's a waste of time. If they had dengue fever, they've already injected it into you, so it's too late now. And other times, the only problem is the way that's, if I'm correct here, I may be wrong here, the way that malaria and other diseases are actually transferred is they bite one person, and they take the disease from one person, they go off to another person and bite them as well. So if everybody just allowed the mosquito just to bite themselves and don't shoo them away, would the dengue fever be transferred when the animal just bit one and not 2? Is that how it's transferred? When the mosquito bites 2 people or 3 people? Maybe I'm wrong. But anyhow, the power of the mind. I used to be in these many mosquitoes, and there were many malaria areas where I used to live as a monk, but I never got malaria. And I think maybe many of those mosquitoes, they would have malaria, but because you had a very good mind, a virtuous mind, you never got the disease. Doctors tell me that many people have got cancer cells inside their body, and many people, are exposed to many bacteria and viruses, but not everybody gets the disease. And I'm sure that many people are probably bitten by dengue mosquitoes, but they never get dengue fever. Why? That's one of the interesting parts which I like to investigate. Maybe the power of your mind, your goodness, your kindness, maybe that's what protects you. It protected me. Anyway, you can always have mosquito screens. Yes, a question in the back? Yeah, you can come up. Oh, okay. Okay. So, one, you got there first. Come on. And you're the second at the back.
Good evening, Ajahn Brahm. I have two questions to ask you. One is, it's always asked by my younger brother. He was wondering, what is the purpose of life? And then the second question is it a must for you to be a monk or a nun to be enlightenment? I mean, how far is this true?
Okay. What is the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to discover the purpose of life. And that is like happiness and peace. That's the purpose of life. And you feel that every time you're at peace and you're happy, it's as if the work has been done. You found your goal. It's always like happiness and peace is the purpose of life. And do you need to be a monk or a nun to become enlightened? It certainly makes it easier. Do you need to go in an aircraft to go to my monastery in Australia? Of course you don't. You can walk from here to Johor, swim across the strait, swim from Singapore to Indonesia, Indonesia swim to Bali, and then walk from Darwin bound down to Perth. You can do that. Now you've got loving kindness. He said, what if you get bitten by sharks? Buddhists have got loving kindness, and the sharks protect you. But you don't need to fly to get to Perth. But if you've got any sense, you might as well get an air ticket, Air Asia or something cheap. It doesn't cost that much these days. So if you've got the nice aircraft to Nibbana, we call it Buddha Air or monks and nuns, why not go the best way? So a lot of time people try and take shortcuts. And I say this, not everyone needs to be a monk or a nun, but why don't we have more monks and nuns? I remember telling this to the Chief Reverend, for Dr. K.C. Dhammananda. He thought it was very funny. In Malaysia, every parent is so happy when they see someone take robes, become a monk or a nun, as long as it isn't their son. No, that's a hypocrite. As long as not my boy becomes a monk, the neighbour's boy, sadhu sadhu, I'll offer the robes. So it's a wonderful lifestyle if you do it well. And not just monks, nuns as well. I'm working really hard to actually re-establish the nuns' ordination. So I've been doing a lot recently. It's something which is happening. We're getting a lot of resistance from Thai monks, senior Thai monks, but not that much. I think it's going to happen in the next year or so. So we have equity and freedom for anyone who wants to be a monk and a nun. They can be. They have a beautiful, wonderful lifestyle. Are you married yet? You're very lucky. You know what they say, that love is blind? Have you heard that saying, love is blind? Well, marriage is an institution for the blind. No, it's not always that way. People can be very happy when they're married. But if people... This is something which really hurts me. This is not joke. When I see people who want to be monks and nuns, but for one reason can't be, I thought, what a great shame. Because that could be a beautiful person, peaceful, enlightened, and maybe a great teacher and inspiration, especially here in Malaysia, where there's not enough monks or nuns around to teach. What a wonderful thing it is if we can make it more easy to have monks and nuns. Symbols of the Buddha, the Sangha. Here in Malaysia, as many as there are in Thailand or wherever. Wouldn't that be wonderful? For that we need volunteers. And if you'd like to put your name down on the sheet outside, have a recruitment drive. No, it makes it easier. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's easier if you're a monk or a nun. Everything is supporting you. So that's the answer to your friend. There was another question at the back there, first of all. The lady, yes. Do you want to come there first? Because you got up first of all.
Thank you, Ajahn Brahm. I'm wondering if I'm missing the Buddha or Dhamma when I choose to fight for my principles. For instance, I'm fighting a bank, just over 1,000 over, for some fraudulent charges on a card which I didn't incur. And most people that I talk to will say, just pay. It's
Okay.
1,000 over. Why stress, worry? But so I'm just asking.
Okay, that's a wonderful question, because sometimes some Buddhists think they should just always let go and never actually fight for what's right and what's good and what's important in life, and that's obviously not the right way to go. The Buddha fought many battles. Sometimes he lost those battles. One of the battles he fought was to try and abolish the caste system in India. And even though that he was a Buddha, he failed, because we still have the caste system in India and also in Sri Lanka. And I'm embarrassed that that caste system even creates a different Buddhist sects in Sri Lanka, which is disgusting. And Sri Lankan Buddhists should be embarrassed that that is still happening now. If you're in one particular caste, you can't ordain in that particular group. That's completely un-Buddhist. But the Buddha fought for causes, and we can do too, but choose your battles. Because sometimes we put a huge amount of effort into something like that, and maybe we can put the same type of effort in something which is a bit more worthwhile, if at all possible. But you choose your battles, and in the end, you choose battles which you can win. Usually that many sort of soldiers or many people always have a strategy for their life. Sometimes there's some battles I know I can't win, so I give up. And I'll put it on the side for a while and see if I can do something later on. One of my favorite sayings which really inspired me was in 1966, I think, there was what's called the Six-Day War between Israel and Egypt and Jordan and Lebanon and Syria. And at that particular time, the former British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan was interviewed. He'd now retired, but he was an elder statesman. And they interviewed him, what do you think about the problem in the Middle East? And he said, there is no problem in the Middle East. And that stunned the journalist, who asked, what do you mean there's no problem in the Middle East? There's a war going on as we speak. What do you mean there's no problem in the Middle East? And this great British statesman replied, sir, a problem is something with a solution. There's no solution in the Middle East, therefore it can't be a problem. Now there's a huge amount of wisdom in that saying. What he was saying is that there's many other things which he has to deal with in life. If he cannot be effective, then it's not something which demands his total attention. How I put that these days, if there is something you can do, if that's a battle you can win, then give it everything you've got. And I don't mean just your finances. If you're emotionally, you've got the time, you're not destroying your other commitments, your children, your family, your work, then go for it. Give it everything you've got. But if you find it's destroying other things in your life, then maybe that's the time to give up. If you can do something about it, and it doesn't cost too much emotionally, stress, whatever, fine, go for it. Because we do need to stand up. And as Buddhists, I think we should stand up for important causes instead of being overly passive, because we create our world, we create our future. We have karmic responsibility to look after ourselves, our family, and our community, our countries, and our world. So yeah, we do have a responsibility. So fight those battles, but only fight battles which you can win. Sometimes you do tactical retreat. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you for that. Yes, please come up. Actually, my monastery fought clay trucks past our monastery for about 4 or 5 years. And no, we took the clay company to court, the brick company. We lost many, many court cases, but we actually wore them down. We were like mosquito. There was this big elephant, but we were a small mosquito. And in the end, we irritated so much they gave in. And they stopped carting all these heavy lorries past our monastery. So yeah, we fought, and we won. We had a good cause. Yeah?
Good evening, Ajahn Brahm.
Good evening.
My question is, what is the Buddhist approach to anger management? The anger, when let it go, we ourselves get frightened. How can we be that angry? So what is the approach, Buddhist approach to this anger management? Thank you.
For anger management, first of all, to understand that anger is unnecessary. It doesn't produce the ends which it promises. You think by getting angry you can affect a positive outcome, but it's always negative. So first of all, know that anger is completely a waste of time. You get angry at someone, they don't listen to you, what you're saying, they just see your anger and think, oh, that lady, she's just really upset. But see, they don't listen to what you're saying. And also, why get angry? Because it hurts you. It doesn't hurt the other people, they walk away. For the management of it, we know that it's wrong. How do we stop getting angry? Well, the first thing to do is have a bit more peace in your life, because usually people get angry at the end of their tether. They're living such a difficult life because they don't have any peace or rest in their life. That's one of the great causes of anger. People get angry because they're hurting. So when somebody shouts at me, I think, oh, you poor thing. You must be in such a terrible state that you shout at a monk. So you never think about you, you think about that poor person and how much they must be suffering when they get angry. When they get angry, you never think, what did I do wrong? You haven't done anything wrong, just they're in a bad mood. But if it's with your own anger, give yourself a more peaceful lifestyle. Don't work so hard. You may become rich, but it's a waste of time being the richest person in the cemetery. So take it easy in life. You've got enough. You can actually do with a little less. So you've got more time for yourself, and more time for your family, more time to rest. And just slowing down actually helps a lot of anger. If you like, you can learn some meditation, which makes you so peaceful. It's so difficult to get angry. And if you do have anger attacks, find out what the triggers are. This person or that person are in a bad mood, or something going wrong with your health. When you find out the triggers, what makes you angry, you can actually overcome them by taking preventative action. So if it's that person, they always make you angry, you try and avoid them. Or if it's some situation which always makes you angry, you try and sort of know that this is a dangerous situation, I'm not going to get angry, and sort of take other precautions. In the end, you can actually relax more, and the anger just doesn't come up in you. Which is why that mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, the meditation and Dhamma, are enormous helps. People just don't get angry when they go to temple and understand the Dhamma. Why get angry for? It's a complete waste of time. Why allow other people to control your happiness? Other people can do whatever they want. I'm not going to get angry. As my teacher Ajahn Brahm said, if anyone calls you a dog, what should you do? Look at your bottom to see if you have a tail. If you haven't got a tail, you're not a dog. Why get angry? I'm sorry, sir, you're wrong. So there's many, many techniques in Buddhism how we deal with anger, and they're very powerful. So there's lots of talks about dealing with anger. And this other part of anger is anger towards yourself, and we call that guilt. And by the same way we can let go of anger caused by other people, we can also let go of the anger caused by ourselves. We just forgive and let go. Become more sort of loose and easy and more understanding. And then anger doesn't come up anymore, nor does guilt. That's a big question. I haven't answered it properly, but hopefully you're not going to get angry at me, are you? There you go, you're managing your anger already. Okay, next question. Okay. First and then afterwards, because you've had one question already, but you always ask very good questions. So, number one, number two.
Yeah, Ajahn, just wish you to share with us on your views of the monks in Myanmar that go onto the streets to fight against, the politicians and the militants. And is there an alternative way out by the Buddhist way?
Okay, that's again a very important question about the monks in Myanmar. Those of you who read the newspapers know that when they started marching, it wasn't a political protest at all. They were just hungry, and the people in that area did not have any food. Apparently, that's what I was told, and I've got no reason to doubt this because this was from some of the activists I knew in Perth. they told me that in that area, that much of the food which would go to the market was taken by the military to feed the soldiers who were on a campaign in the sort of the borderlands of Burma. And so they were just protesting for food. And they weren't saying down with the government, out with the junta. They were chanting the Metta Sutta, may all beings, including the generals, be happy and well. And that's what gave it a lot of power. But apparently the organizing committee of these marches were approached by the students and other political activists, and they made a mistake of allowing the students and activists to join in. And it was the students and the activists who started shouting political slogans and turned the whole thing into a political act. And of course we know what happened next. But they did a wonderful thing, and over in a country like Australia, that so many people came to me and said just how inspiring those monks were, because they had a demonstration without any anger at all. When their persecutors were being given love and compassion. That had a huge powerful effect in the West. And I'm not quite sure just how much effect it had. Sometimes that these causes and effects take a long time to wear out, to actually come to fruition. When you plant a mango seed, it's many years before you get a mango. I think an amazing, powerful seed was planted there. Certainly the monks at that time took the moral high stage, high ground, embarrassed the junta. And I think that I have heard that elections have been called, a new constitution is being written. I hope that the goodness and the kindness and the sacrifice and the non-violence of those monks, the powerful karma of that has actually done something. So I still remember a poem by William Blake, so the 18th, 19th century English poet. And I quoted this on the ABC radio at the time, of the riots, of the problem in Myanmar, who said, "Vengeance to the tyrant fled, and caught the tyrant in his bed, and slew the wicked tyrant's head, and became a tyrant in his stead." That's what happens with revenge. You know, we do the right thing, what we think, and kill the tyrants, and now we are the tyrant. So what those Buddhist monks did in Myanmar was unique in our world. It really was a peaceful protest. Not even shouting abuse at others, but chanting words of kindness and love and peace. And that was unique. I think that's why it has power. And I think its effect is still being worked out. So I'm hopeful. Sometimes that's Buddhism and politics. How much should Buddhist principles get involved in politics? I always think, especially Buddhist monks, we should be like referees on a soccer pitch. You know, we hold up the yellow card and the red card sometimes. We never kick a ball. So we do need people who have the moral conscience of nations. And in Burma, the monks lived up to their role as a moral conscience and pointing out with their sacrifice that something was very wrong in that country. And that's as far as they could go. And I think that's what monks should do. To make evident, non-violently, where problems lie. Those are great questions, because these are very powerful and deep ones, and sometimes I wonder whether I give the adequate answers, but I'm trying my very best. And I certainly know that violence never works, never has, never will. Yeah, oh, your question, yes?
Right. Sorry, because of time constraint, maybe this will be the second last question.
Okay.
Ajahn Brahm, my question relates to enlightenment. Can a virtuous layperson who doesn't meditate at all and does not know how to meditate get enlightened? The second question relating to enlightenment concerns meditators, including monks and nuns. How does each of these persons, meditators, realize which level of enlightenment he or she has reached. No, bearing in mind that there are 4 levels of enlightenment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I mean, what's the first question again?
The first question concerns a lay person who is virtuous, but does not know how to meditate. Neither does he meditate.
Can they get enlightened? Yeah.
Can he get enlightened?
Yeah. Well, can you get a degree without going to university? Can you get O levels without going to school?
You can't.
No. That's the way you've got to meditate. This is why. This is called how to let go and how to be at peace and how to have fun. But why don't we meditate? It's good fun. Sit there doing nothing. What could be more fun? Are you a lazy person?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Well, this is teaching how to be really lazy and have a bit of peace in your life. So sometimes the people don't understand what meditation is. Meditation is the art of letting go, being peace, being still, taking a rest, relaxing. So why can't we relax the mind and be peaceful and so still? Oh, it's so nice. So yeah, I mean, I don't know why people don't do it. Because I was reading in the Straits Times that Christian meditation, we had one Muslim came to Perth from Singapore, was meditating on my retreat. They loved it. So if they can do it, why can't you? Don't worry, you've still got time. So yeah, we need to meditate, we need to be peaceful, we need to be calm, and that's how we train ourselves to be peaceful, calm. And it's like, I don't know, like a soccer star, like, was it Ronaldinho, plays for Manchester United, saying he doesn't need to go to training. Even the best soccer stars need to go to training if they're going to be good. So this is training the mind, how to be peaceful and calm, and how to become enlightened. So yeah, you do need it. And the 4 stages of enlightenment, gee, you know, it's like people, because I would just fly on Singapore Airlines these days, people wonder, I wonder what's it like in this new suite class. But first of all, you've got to go economy class first of all. Maybe then later on you can work up to business class, and then maybe first class, and then suite class. The different levels. Go to the first level first, and then you may be able to see what the second level is. And the second level, you might be able to understand the third level and the fourth level. I remember when I was about 13 or 14, I was studying a couple of years away from my O levels, and someone gave me an O level paper in chemistry. I couldn't understand a word of it. We've got to get a bit closer to enlightenment to understand what these levels are. But how you really know is how peaceful it is, how free it is, how happy it is. So the more peaceful, the more free, the more happy, the closer you are to enlightenment. So that's how you really know, just a degree of peace, stillness and freedom. So these things that just do not bother you anymore.
Can it be a sort of a personal delusion that you have reached level 2, level 3 and so on?
Oh yeah, I mean at some places they give you certificates. That's really a delusion. Look at the monks here. See the monks, where we don't wear different types of robe. If you become like a stream winner, you don't get like a pip or like a chevron on your arm, like a lance corporal. And then when you become a once returner, you get sort of sergeant stripes. And then when you become a non-returner, you become captain. And then when you become an arahat, you become general. No, we don't have that. The more you disappear, then the closer you are to enlightenment. The less ego, the less self. So anyone goes around saying, I'm enlightened, look at me. That's a sure sign that don't understand what enlightenment is at all. So the more you promote yourself, the more ego you have, the further you're away from enlightenment. So enlightenment is stages of disappearance as you fade away more and more and more. Because you're quiet. See that? Shut him up. Because everyone wants to be enlightened. They have this wonderful saying, he who says doesn't know. He who knows doesn't say. You want to say anything?
Any more question? One last question. Last question. Use the mic.
Is another question, or is it there?
Actually.
Okay. I know I remember giving one talk and somebody came to the microphone. My question is, can we go now?
Sorry about that, but this will be the last, I think.
Okay.
All right, good day, Ajahn Brahm. I would like to know what's the Buddhist perception of euthanasia?
The Buddhist perception of euthanasia is not euthanasia. Youth all over the world is a problem. Youth in Asia. It's a joke. Come on. Did the Buddha commit euthanasia? Because, according to the text of the Chapala shrine, 3 months before parinirvana, he deliberately gave up his life force. Fascinating. Maybe the Buddha. He said if he wanted to, he could have carried on for the whole eon, but he decided not to. Is that euthanasia? Some people say maybe it was, but euthanasia was a personal issue for us in Western Australia because the first person in our modern world who took legally assisted euthanasia was Mr. Dent from Darwin, who was a Buddhist. A Buddhist was the first person who voluntarily had assisted euthanasia. And because he was a Buddhist, I never met him, but my second monk at the time, Ajahn Dhamma, did talk to him when he came to Perth for some treatment. So we knew personally why he elected to take euthanasia. He decided to take euthanasia not because he was afraid of the many years in front of him of pain. He had one of these degenerative illnesses, no possibility of cure, very low quality of life, bedridden with all sorts of tubes in him. His reason for taking euthanasia was because his wife was giving him 24 hours care and had no life for herself. He decided to commit euthanasia to free his wife so she could have a life. And I know that is true. It was compassion for his wife. That's why he said, there's no hope of me surviving. I'm going to be like this for a long time maybe. But you, wife, have a healthy body. I want you to be free. Is that bad karma? I can't say. To me it sounds like compassion. But there's only one person who really would know that, and that was Mr. Dent. So what I do know is there's so much on the edge that I think that we should give people the freedom to make that choice for themselves. So certainly, I think that in those situations, the law should take a back seat. And I think that many of you may have seen, maybe some of your relations. I know I've visited some people, and I remember one person, he was a Buddhist, an English Buddhist, who was dying of lung cancer. And he told his brother, his son, can't you take me out the back and shoot me? He was suffering so much. And he had days and days and days of this in front of him. If it is bad karma, it's only small bad karma. So I don't think it's something we really need to worry about too much. As long as they have legal safeguards, compassionate, kind safeguards, so you don't ask your mother to euthanize herself because you're going to inherit her property. As long as there's legal safeguards, I think it's a good idea. And sometimes people ask me that they have their pets, their cat, their dog. You take it to the vet, it's got cancer. What do? Do you tell the vet, can you kill my dog? Or do you allow your dog to suffer with the cancer? What do you do? Remember this man who took his Labrador, you know, these big dogs, the Labradors, to the vet? And the Labrador only had an ear infection. But the vet picked him up, looked around his back, underneath, and said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to put your dog down. And my friend said, what do you mean put him down? He's only got an ear infection. He said, look, I have to put him down. He's too heavy. But being serious, I tell people, if that's your dog or your cat, or maybe your mother in a coma, why not ask your dog, do you want to die? Or do you want to carry on? And many disciples over in Australia and other places have been using that technique. They take their cat or their dog that's very, very sick to the vet. And the vet says, look, it's really serious, I've got to put it down. Ask the dog, the cat. Because if that's your pet, you've lived with that animal for such a long time, you ask the question and you will know the answer. The last time I did that, Judy, one of my disciples, her dog had a terrible cancer, I think couldn't walk, was dragging itself around. Took it to the vet said, look, you should put it down. And she took that dog aside, looked at it in the eyes, and said, do you want to die? And she felt straight away the dog say, no, I don't. So she told the vet, no, I'm sorry. She never told the vet the dog decided. Otherwise they would put her down or put her in a funny farm. But that's what she did. And she came to me afterwards and she said, it was amazing. The dog made a full recovery. And I was so surprised, even the vet couldn't believe it. Sometimes those animals, they know what they want, but sometimes those animals, they're suffering so much. You ask the cat, the dog, do you want to go? And the dog says, yes. Can't stand it. Too much pain. And then it's your dog's decision. You just pass the message on to the vet. And that way that person decides. And this is what you can do if one of your loved ones is in a coma, a bad accident or a bad disease. Maybe your mum. Ask your mum, do you want to die? Do you want the ventilator turned off? If you're her daughter or son, you'll be close enough, you'll feel inside what the right answer is. Trust that. That'll be the right answer. So then it's not your decision anymore. It's theirs. You're just listening to your mother, your father. And it works. And that solves this terrible ethical dilemma. If I don't turn the machine off, I'm just giving them so much pain. If I turn the machine off, I'm killing them. You're not doing anything. You're asking them what they want. And even if they can't speak to you with their mouth, you can feel what they want. So that's actually euthanasia, and actually how we can deal with that. So hopefully you don't feel like being euthanized yet, even though it's going late. But maybe we can finish off now. There's another talk, another place.
Yes.
So thank you for listening today, and hopefully you enjoyed Saturday Night Live, or we finished Saturday Night Dead with euthanasia.
Thank you, Ajahn Brahm. Can all of us say sadhu 3 times? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, I have to remind you, that's not the way you say sadhu. That was weak. No energy, no life. So whatever you do, give it everything you've got. Put happiness, put energy in the life. So, okay, 3 big sadhus. Sadhu.
Sadhu. Sadhu.
That makes you happier, more fun.
Thank you, Ajahn Brahm. And thank you to all the devotees, brothers and sisters in the Dharma, for coming, spending your Saturday evening with us. On behalf of BGF, we'd like to thank all of you, and also 2 anonymous sponsors for making tonight's possible, renting this hall for us. To really end this night, I'd like to invite Ajahn Brahm to lead us in the sharing of merits.
Okay, yes. So all you ghosts sitting on the empty seats, pay attention now, because we're now going to share merits. To all beings, all sentient beings, especially our deceased relations. Please chant with me the Idang. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu yatayo. Idam me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu yatayo. Idam me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu yatayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.